My phone buzzed at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. The kind of morning where nothing feels different. The sun was coming through the kitchen window, my coffee was getting cold, and I was checking emails like any other day. But that single call, that single second of hearing my father's voice break in half, changed everything. He said 5 words. Your brother's entire family, they're gone. I thought he meant they'd moved. I was so wrong. Like this video, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and drop your city or country in the comments. Let's build this community together. I remember that morning like it was frozen in time. My name is Logan. I'm 42 years old, and I live in a house I built with my own hands 15 years ago. I have a wife named Eliza, 2 kids, and a life that felt solid. Routine. Predictable. The kind of life where the biggest problem I faced was whether the city council would approve funding for the new library wing I was advocating for. I worked in real estate development. Nothing glamorous. Nothing dangerous. I was the guy who built strip malls and apartment complexes. I went to church on Sundays with my family. I paid my taxes. I had coffee with my brother Mason every other Friday. Mason was different from me, younger by 4 years. He was an accountant, meticulous, quiet, the kind of guy who noticed numbers that didn't add up. While I was out there pitching projects to investors, Mason was sitting in an office, auditing financial records. My wife Eliza used to joke that Mason was the responsible one, and I was the dreamer. She wasn't wrong. That Tuesday morning, I was sitting at my kitchen counter with my laptop open. My coffee was in my favorite mug, the one my daughter made for me in art class. I was scrolling through emails, responding to a contractor about building permits, living my normal life. And then the phone rang. It was my father, Quinn. I didn't think much of it. My dad called maybe once a week. We had a good relationship, but we weren't the kind of family that called constantly. We saw each other. We checked in. We were there when it mattered. This was 6:47 a.m., which was a little unusual for him, but I figured maybe he had an early appointment or wanted to catch me before work. Hey, Dad, I answered, already moving to take a sip of my coffee. There was silence, just a second or two, but long enough that I knew something was wrong. My father wasn't a man who got emotional. He was old military, served in the Navy, worked in logistics for 30 years, and retired with a quiet dignity and a pension. He didn't do drama. He didn't do fear. His voice, when he spoke, was shattered. Logan, I don't even know how to say this. My stomach dropped. I set my coffee down slowly. Dad, what's wrong? It's Mason. Logan, it's Mason and his family. There was an incident last night. A shooting. At their home. Logan, there he stopped. I could hear him breathing. I could hear him trying to compose himself. Dad, what are you saying? Mason is dead. His wife Giselle is dead. Their children, Logan, they're all gone. All of them. The police called this morning. They found them last night around 9 o'clock. I didn't move. I don't think I even breathed. Logan, are you there? My mouth was dry. My hands were shaking. That doesn't make sense. Dad, that's not possible. I know it's not possible. My father's voice cracked. But it is. I'm heading to the police station now. Your mother is falling apart. Logan, I need you to come over. We need to be together right now. I hung up. I don't even remember ending the call. I just remember the kitchen spinning. My coffee getting colder and colder on the counter. My wife Eliza came downstairs about 10 minutes later, still in her robe. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said. What happened? I couldn't form words. I tried to tell her, but nothing came out except a sound. A broken, hollow sound. Mason had a daughter named Harper who was 12 years old. She loved volleyball. She was tall for her age, awkward in that beautiful way kids are when they're growing into themselves. She had her mother's smile. Giselle was 39, a teacher, the kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday and brought homemade lasagna to church potlucks. They had 2 boys as well, Colin, who was 16, and Oliver, who was 14. Beautiful kids, smart kids, living kids, until they weren't. By the time I got to my parents' house, police had already cordoned off their area. There were news vans pulling up. My mother was sitting in their living room, staring at nothing. My father was at the kitchen table, talking to a detective named Colin. Coincidentally the same name as Mason's middle son. Detective Colin looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from seeing things you can't unsee. Your brother's house was hit sometime around 8:30 p.m., he said to me, and I sat down because my legs wouldn't hold me. Neighbors heard gunshots. 3 sets of gunshots, about 30 seconds apart. By the time patrol got there, it was over. The family was dead. All 6 of them. 6 of them. Not 5. I didn't know what he meant at first. Then my father whispered. Mason's parents were visiting. Colin's parents. Mason's mother's sister. They were having dinner together. Wait, not 6. That would be 8 people, Detective Colin said quietly. 8 victims. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. 8 people. Gone. In my mind, I kept cycling through the faces. Giselle laughing at my jokes. Harper asking me to help her with her math homework last month. The boys, good kids, respectful, the kind of teenagers every parent prays for. Do you have anyone in custody? My father asked. Detective Colin exchanged a glance with his partner. Not yet, but we have witnesses. Neighbors saw at least 3 armed individuals leave the property. They fled in a dark sedan, direction unknown at this time. The fire department is still processing the scene. We'll know more once we have preliminary forensics. I should have felt something more. Shock, rage, grief. But what I felt was something else. Something hollow and confused. Why? I heard myself ask. Why would anyone do this? Detective Colin looked at me for a long moment. That's what we're trying to figure out. Your brother, did he have any enemies? Anyone who might want to hurt him? My father and I looked at each other. Mason was an accountant, I said slowly. He audited companies. He was quiet. He didn't do anything that would make someone want to kill him. To kill his entire family. What company did he work for? The detective asked, pulling out a notebook. My father answered. Harmon's Financial Consulting. He's been there about 8 years. Detective Colin made a note, but something in his expression had shifted. A slight tension, like he recognized the name. Logan, my father said, and his hand gripped my shoulder. There's something else. Something the detective told me before you arrived. I looked up at him. The neighbors, the ones who saw the shooters leave, they said they heard one of the gunmen speaking into a radio as they were leaving. The witness reported hearing him say one thing clearly. Package is terminated. Per your orders, sir. I didn't understand what that meant. Not yet. I would soon. Detective Colin closed his notebook slowly. Mr. Logan, he said, I need you to understand something. This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't a crime of passion. The precision, the execution, the way it was carried out, this was professional. This was planned. Someone ordered this. My entire world tilted. That doesn't make sense, I heard myself say. This is a mistake. It's not a mistake, the detective said quietly. And I think your family already knows that. I think someone here knew something about why your brother might have been a target. I think whoever did this knew exactly who they were looking for. My father's grip on my shoulder tightened. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Fear. What aren't you telling me? I asked him. My father looked away. Logan, sit down. That's when everything changed. That's when I realized this wasn't random. That's when I understood that my brother's death, that the death of 8 people in one night, was just the beginning of something far, far darker. The next 2 days were a blur. Police everywhere. Crime scene investigators walking through Mason's house with cameras and evidence bags. Media vans camping outside my parents' neighborhood like vultures. By Wednesday evening, the story was national news. Family of 8 shot dead in their home was the headline. Execution-style killing leaves investigators baffled, read another. They made it sound random. A robbery gone wrong. A home invasion. The kind of senseless tragedy that could happen to anyone, anywhere, anytime. But it wasn't random. Detective Colin knew it. My father knew it. I was starting to understand it. Thursday morning, Colin called me directly. He asked me to come to the precinct. Alone. Eliza drove me there in silence. She kept reaching for my hand, but I couldn't feel it. I was numb. My brother was dead. My sister-in-law was dead. My niece Harper, my nephews Colin and Oliver, all of them gone. And everyone around me was talking about it like it was a mystery show on television. Detective Colin was waiting in an interview room. He wasn't alone. There was another officer there, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a scar on her left temple. She introduced herself as Agent Blake from the FBI. The FBI? Why is the FBI involved? I asked, sitting down across from them. Let me show you something, Blake said, sliding a folder across the table. We need to understand your brother's professional life. Everything about it. Nothing is off limits. Nothing is too small. Inside the folder were photographs, financial documents, bank statements. I recognized Mason's handwriting on some of them. Your brother wasn't just an accountant, Blake said quietly. 3 months ago, he flagged a series of irregular transactions within his company's largest client account. Millions of dollars. Moving in patterns that didn't align with legitimate business expenses. What kind of patterns? I asked. Payments to shell corporations, private military contractors, weapons manufacturers, defense technology firms. All of it routed through what looked like legitimate consulting fees, but it was anything but legitimate. Blake leaned forward. Your brother brought these discrepancies to his supervisor. And that's when things got complicated. Detective Colin pulled out another stack of documents. Your brother requested a transfer to the company's internal audit division. He wanted to investigate the account holder directly. That's when his supervisor told him to drop it. Explicitly told him that the account belonged to someone he shouldn't be asking questions about. Who? I asked. Blake and Colin exchanged a look. General Victor Harrington, Blake said. Retired 4 years ago from the Army Special Operations Command. He's now a civilian consultant, though he maintains significant influence in military procurement and defense contracting circles. I didn't know who that was, but the way Blake said the name made it clear that he was important. Dangerous. Your brother didn't drop it, Blake continued. Instead, he started documenting everything. He created duplicate files. He reached out to people in the Department of Defense who handle corruption complaints. And then he did something very brave, or very foolish. He scheduled a meeting with an attorney to discuss whistleblower protections. When? I asked. The morning of his death, Detective Collins said. He had an appointment at 2 p.m. He never made it. I felt the room spin. Wait. Are you telling me that someone killed my entire family because Mason was going to report financial crimes? We're telling you that it's the leading theory, Blake said. And we're also telling you that we've been investigating General Harrington for 3 years. He's untouchable. He has friends in the Pentagon, friends in Congress, friends in law enforcement. Every investigation into his financial dealings gets buried. Every person who gets close to exposing him either backs off or disappears. Disappears? I asked. Colin pulled out another file. 5 photographs. 5 people I'd never seen before. These are individuals who were connected to investigations into General Harrington's activities, Collins said. All 5 are dead. Suicide, we were told. Car accidents. Natural causes. But the timing, Logan, the timing is too coincidental. I looked at the 5 faces. A man in his 60s. A woman maybe 45. 2 younger men. An older woman. 5 people, 5 different deaths, 5 different circumstances. You think he killed them? I asked. I think he had them killed, Blake corrected. There's a difference. General Harrington doesn't pull triggers himself. He gives orders. I stood up. I couldn't sit anymore. I walked to the corner of the room, my fists clenched. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Why now? Because you're going to find out anyway, Blake said. The media is going to start digging. They're going to find out that Mason was under investigation, that he was about to blow the whistle on something massive. And we'd rather you hear the truth from us than from speculation and conspiracy theories online. But also, Colin added, because we need your help. I turned around. My help? How? I'm nobody. I build shopping centers. I don't know anything about military corruption or financial crimes. You know your family, Blake said, and we need you to tell us everything. Everything about Mason's work. Everything he said about his job over the last 6 months. Who he was talking to. Any meetings he mentioned. Any concerns he expressed. Any changes in his behavior. I tried to remember. Mason and I had coffee every other Friday. We'd talk about our kids, our lives, work. But I was usually more focused on my own projects, my own problems. Did he mention anything unusual? Something about work? He was stressed, I said slowly. About 3 months ago, he started being more withdrawn. He'd make comments about not being able to talk about certain things. I thought it was just work stress. I told him to take a vacation. Did he mention anyone at his work specifically? Blake asked. There was someone. Adrian. His supervisor. I remember Mason mentioning Adrian once or twice. He said Adrian had told him not to ask questions about something. I remember thinking it was strange at the time, but I didn't push it. Blake and Colin exchanged another look. Blake typed something into her phone, and 30 seconds later, she turned her screen to me. It was a photograph of a man in his 50s, military bearing, cold eyes. The caption read, Adrian Coleman, Senior Audit Manager at Harmon's Financial Consulting, retired Army Colonel. This Adrian? Blake asked. I think so. I only saw him once at a company event. But yes, I think that's him. Blake made a note. We've been looking at Adrian Coleman for months. He's General Harrington's right hand. He manages all of Harrington's civilian contracts. And he was at the company the day your brother scheduled his meeting with the attorney. So Adrian knew? I said. It wasn't a question. Almost certainly, Colin confirmed. Which means someone in that chain of command knew that your brother was about to become a problem. I sat back down. My legs couldn't hold me anymore. My brother is dead because he wanted to do the right thing, I said quietly. Yes, Blake said, and there was genuine sympathy in her voice. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry that your brother died trying to expose corruption at the highest levels of military contracting. What happens now? I asked. Now, Blake said, we build a case. We investigate every connection between General Harrington, Adrian Coleman, and your brother's death. We talk to witnesses. We examine forensic evidence. We follow the money. And you're telling me all of this because you deserve to know what happened to your family, Blake said. But also because we think there's something else. Something Mason knew or found that scared General Harrington enough to authorize this kind of violence. Usually, Harrington is more subtle. This was bold, brutal, public, which means your brother knew something really significant. She leaned back in her chair. And I think you can help us figure out what that was. Because I think your brother tried to tell you. I think he left something behind. Something that explains why he was willing to risk everything. I looked between Blake and Colin. What do you mean, left something behind? Colin placed a single item on the table. It was a small metal key, the kind used for a safety deposit box. This was found in your brother's desk, Colin said. At his office, hidden behind a drawer. It's to a box at First National Bank. We need a warrant to open it. But before we go through official channels, we wanted to talk to you. Family might want to know what's in there first. My hand shook as I reached for the key. What if I open it? I asked. What if I go to the bank? Then you need to be very careful, Blake said. Because if that box contains what we think it does, you're about to become very interesting to General Harrington. And right now, being interesting to him is a death sentence. I didn't sleep that night. The metal key sat on my nightstand, catching the light from the street lamp outside our bedroom window. Eliza lay beside me, her breathing steady, but I knew she wasn't sleeping either. She was waiting. We both were. At 6 a.m., I got up and dressed. I didn't tell Eliza where I was going. She already knew. First National Bank opened at 9 a.m. I was there at 8:50, waiting outside like a criminal. My hands were shaking. Every person who walked past seemed to be watching me. Every car that slowed down felt like a threat. The bank manager's name was Nathaniel. Older guy, professional demeanor, the kind of person who'd seen every financial emergency imaginable but never asked too many questions. I didn't have to show him the key twice. He already had a form for me to sign, a release statement acknowledging that I was accessing the box under my brother's account. "Your brother opened this box 14 months ago," Nathaniel said, leading me to the vault. "He paid 5 years in advance. The balance is still active." 14 months. Right around the time Mason told me he was stressed about work. The vault was cold, sterile. Nathaniel inserted a master key alongside mine, and the box opened. Inside was a sealed envelope, thick with documents. My name was written on the front in Mason's precise handwriting. I didn't open it there. I couldn't. I took it, thanked Nathaniel with a voice that didn't sound like mine, and drove to a parking lot on the edge of town. A place where I could think. A place where I could read without anyone watching. The envelope contained 3 things: a handwritten letter from Mason, a flash drive, and a stack of printed documents that looked like financial records. I opened the letter first. "Logan, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I'm leaving this letter because if I disappear or if anything unexplained happens to my family, I need someone I trust to know the truth. That person is you. I've made a terrible mistake. About 6 months ago, I discovered something at work that I should have left alone. I told myself I was doing the right thing. I told myself that whistleblowers are heroes. But I was naive. I didn't understand who I was dealing with. General Victor Harrington has been systematically stealing from military budgets using shell corporations and fraudulent contracts. The amounts are staggering, Logan. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. Maybe more. I've been trying to trace the money, but it's complicated. It goes through so many layers. But here's what scared me. It's not just about money. The military equipment that Harrington was supposed to supply to deployed units, that equipment never arrived. Soldiers were left without proper gear because Harrington sold it on the black market or kept it for resale at inflated prices. People died, Logan. American soldiers died because of this. When I tried to report it through proper channels, I was warned to stop. Adrian Coleman, my supervisor, told me directly, "Drop this, or you'll regret it." I should have listened. Instead, I kept digging. Last week, I received a visit at my office from someone I'd never seen before. He didn't introduce himself, but he knew things about me. About Giselle. About Harper and the boys. He told me that General Harrington was willing to let me walk away if I agreed to keep quiet. He said if I didn't, my family would pay the price. I told Giselle. I wanted to stop. I wanted to take the deal. But then I found something else. Something that changed everything. On the flash drive are encrypted files, financial records, communications, evidence of payments to private military contractors. Real contractors, Logan. Mercenaries. I believe Harrington has been using them for more than just procurement. I believe they've been used to eliminate threats. People who knew too much. People who asked the wrong questions. If what I think is true, General Harrington isn't just a thief. He's a murderer. And he's using military resources and federal authority to cover it up. I'm going to call an attorney next week. I'm going to do this right. I'm going to become a whistleblower and let the federal government handle it. I'm terrified, but I can't live with myself if I don't. But if something happens before I can make that call, if something happens to me or to my family, I need you to take these documents to someone you can trust. The FBI, a federal prosecutor, someone who can't be bought by Harrington's money or scared by his connections. I'm sorry, Logan. I'm sorry I didn't listen when people told me to let this go. I'm sorry I put my family at risk. But some things are worth the risk. Love, Mason. I read the letter 3 times. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. Everything Detective Colin and Agent Blake had told me crystallized into a single, horrifying truth. My brother died because he was right. He died because he found evidence of something so massive, so evil, that someone in power decided his entire family was an acceptable loss. I looked at the stack of printed documents. They were pages and pages of financial transactions. Wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Payments to companies with names like Prometheus Security Solutions and Titan Defense Industries. Documents showing military equipment listed as deployed to field operations that never actually arrived at their destinations. One document caught my eye. A payment authorization dated 3 weeks before Mason's death. The amount, $2.4 million. The recipient, Tactical Solutions Group. The notation in the authorization field simply read, Target Elimination Services, Discretionary Fund. Target elimination. My stomach turned. I inserted the flash drive into my phone. It required a password. I tried several combinations. Mason's birthday, his children's birthdays, the date of his wedding. Nothing worked. But there was a file that opened without a password. A text document titled read_this_first. Inside was a message. Logan, if you're reading this on a standard device, you'll need to get the flash drive to someone who can decrypt it properly. The password is hidden in Mom and Dad's old photo album, the one they kept on the mantle. Page 47. The date written on the back of the photograph. That's the password. Don't trust anyone in law enforcement until you've verified their badge and identity through the FBI's main office directly. Call the FBI field office yourself. Don't use numbers from the internet or from business cards. Look up the number yourself. Trust no one except blood. I sat in my car for 2 hours, just holding the documents. People walked past. Cars came and went. The world kept spinning like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. My phone rang. It was my mother. Logan, honey, where are you? The police called. They said they need to talk to you. They found something in the house. Something in Mason's study they missed before. What? I asked. They wouldn't say over the phone, but they said it's important. They said you should come to your father's house. They said to come now. I hung up and started the car. As I drove through the city toward my parents' neighborhood, I kept thinking about what Mason had written. About people who knew too much. About soldiers who died because equipment never arrived. About private military contractors being paid to eliminate targets. About the 5 photographs Detective Collins showed me. 5 dead people. 5 investigations that went nowhere. And now a 6th. And 7. And 8. My brother. My sister-in-law. My niece. My nephews. And 4 members of their extended family. As I pulled onto my parents' street, I noticed a dark sedan parked 3 houses down. The engine was running. 2 men sat in the front seat. They were watching. I didn't drive to my parents' house. Instead, I drove past slowly, saw the police cars and detectives standing in the driveway, and kept going. Because I suddenly understood something that made my blood cold. If someone in the police department was on Harrington's payroll, if there was corruption that deep, then I couldn't trust anyone. Not even the people who were supposed to protect me. I drove to a library across town. A public place with security cameras. I found a computer terminal in a quiet corner and looked up the FBI's main field office number myself. Not from Google. From the physical phone directory they still kept at the reference desk. When Agent Blake answered, I recognized her voice immediately. Agent Blake, it's Logan Brennan. I need to meet with you. Alone. And I need to tell you what my brother knew. But not over the phone. And not at any police station. There was a pause. Where are you? Blake asked. I told her. Don't move, she said. Don't talk to anyone. I'm sending someone to get you. 40 minutes. Sit tight. As I hung up, I looked down at the documents and the flash drive in my hands. Mason had died trying to tell the truth. And now, I was the only one who could finish what he started. Agent Blake's team picked me up in an unmarked sedan. No sirens, no announcement. Just a quiet vehicle that appeared at the library entrance driven by a woman with a federal badge and ice-cold eyes. She didn't introduce herself. She just said, You're Logan. Get in. We drove north, away from the city, toward the suburbs. Nobody spoke. The radio played soft jazz. The woman's partner in the front seat kept checking the rearview mirror like he was expecting to be followed. We arrived at a small office building that looked like every other office building in America. The kind of place where accountants and insurance agents work. The kind of place where no one looks twice. Blake met me in a conference room on the third floor. She'd brought another agent with her, a man in his 60s with a military bearing and sharp features. He introduced himself as Agent Ryder from the Pentagon's Office of Inspector General. "Before we start," Ryder said, "you need to understand the gravity of what you're about to tell us. Everything you say, everything you show us, it becomes part of a federal investigation. Once you start talking, you can't stop. There's no going back." "My brother and his family are dead," I said flatly. "I'm past the point of going back." Blake and Ryder exchanged a look. I placed the envelope and flash drive on the table. "My brother left me a message," I said, and I told them everything. The letter, the documents, the evidence of fraud, of stolen military equipment, of payments to private security firms with names like Target Elimination Services. I watched their faces as they read Mason's letter. Ryder's jaw tightened. Blake's expression never changed. When they finished, Ryder leaned back in his chair. "This is bigger than we thought," he said quietly. "How much bigger?" I asked. "We've been investigating General Harrington for 3 years," Blake said. "We know he's dirty. We know he's stolen from military contracts. But what we don't have is hard evidence that he's ordered murders. That's the line we've been trying to cross. Mason's documents suggest he did exactly that," I said. "Suggests is the operative word," Ryder said. "Suggestions aren't enough in federal court. We need proof. We need testimony. We need a clear chain of command showing Harrington gave specific orders to eliminate specific people." "The flash drive might have that," I said, "but it's password protected. Mason left instructions for me to find the password in my parents' photo album." Blake nodded. "We need to get that album, and we need to decrypt that drive. But we also need to be careful about how we do this. General Harrington has friends in very high places. If he gets wind that we're moving on him, he could disappear. He could destroy evidence. Or worse. Or worse what?" I asked. Ryder and Blake didn't answer immediately. "Or worse," Ryder finally said. "He could have you eliminated. You're a civilian now with access to classified-level evidence of federal crimes. From Harrington's perspective, you're a liability." I thought about the dark sedan parked 3 houses down from my parents' neighborhood. "I'm being watched, aren't I?" I asked. "Probably," Blake confirmed. "Harrington has resources. Private security contractors. People who work off the books. If he knows you retrieved that deposit box, he'll want to know what's inside. So what do we do?" Blake pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Inside were photographs, financial records, communications between General Harrington and Adrian Coleman. "We've been building pieces," Blake said. "We know Harrington formed a shell company called Prometheus Defense Solutions 8 years ago. We know this company has contracts with the Department of Defense worth over $300 million. We know most of those contracts are fraudulent. The equipment and services were never delivered, or they were delivered substandard and sold at a premium to other buyers." "How does that connect to the murders?" I asked. 3 years ago, Ryder said, a federal auditor named Evan Chun was examining Prometheus contracts. He found irregularities. He reported it to his supervisor. 2 weeks later, Evan Chun was hit by a car on a busy street. Hit and run. The driver was never found. Case closed. He pulled out a photograph. A man in his 40s, smiling in what looked like an office holiday party. 2 years ago, Blake continued, a Pentagon procurement specialist named Felix Rodriguez challenged one of Prometheus's contracts. He said the delivery dates didn't match the invoices. He wanted to investigate further. 2 months later, Felix had a heart attack. He was 34 years old. No history of cardiac problems. Another photograph. Another dead face. Then there was Daphne Williams, Ryder said, FBI financial crimes analyst. She was looking into Prometheus as part of a broader investigation into military contracting fraud. She died in a house fire. The investigation concluded it was faulty wiring. I looked at the photographs. 3 people I'd never met. 3 people with families. 3 people who died because they asked the wrong questions. How many? I asked. That we can connect? Blake said. At least 5. Possibly more. The common thread is that all of them were looking at General Harrington's operations, and all of them died under circumstances that looked accidental or coincidental. But the pattern is undeniable. Mason makes 6, I said. Mason makes 6, Ryder confirmed. And your brother's death wasn't subtle. Your brother's death was a message. A message to who? I asked. To everyone else who might consider following in his footsteps, Blake said. To anyone else who might think about becoming a whistleblower. Your brother's entire family, wiped out, in a single night, with witnesses. It's the opposite of subtle. It's a statement. This is what happens if you cross me. I felt my hands shake. Here's what we're going to do, Ryder said. You're going to get that photo album. You're going to give us the password. We're going to decrypt that flash drive. And we're going to recover every piece of evidence your brother collected. And then, I asked. And then, Blake said, we build a case that's airtight. We go to a federal prosecutor. We present the evidence. We seek an indictment for fraud, conspiracy, and murder. And we arrest General Victor Harrington. It sounds simple when you say it like that, I said. It's not simple, Ryder said. It's complicated. It's dangerous. And there's a very real possibility that Harrington will try to eliminate you before we can move against him. So what's my protection? I asked. Us, Blake said. For now, we're going to put you in a secure location. We're going to assign agents to watch you. And we're going to move very, very fast. The longer you're exposed, the longer Harrington has to react. My wife, I said suddenly. My children. What about them? We'll protect them too, Blake said. But they need to cooperate. They need to understand the severity of what we're dealing with. I nodded slowly. It was all happening too fast. My brother was dead. My family's security was gone. And now I was becoming part of a federal investigation into a military general with seemingly unlimited resources and a history of eliminating threats. There's something else, Ryder said, and his tone changed. It became heavier. What? I asked. The dark sedan you saw outside your parents' house, Ryder said. We ran the plates. The vehicle is registered to a private security firm. We've connected that firm to General Harrington before. But here's where it gets interesting. We've also connected that firm to several Defense Department officials. People in high positions. People who should know better. My stomach dropped. What are you saying? I asked. I'm saying that Harrington's corruption might go deeper than just military contracting, Blake said quietly. I'm saying there might be people in government, real government, not just contractors, who are helping him, who are protecting him. People like who? I asked. That's what we need to figure out, Ryder said. And that's why we need to move carefully. Because if we arrest Harrington and his government co-conspirators find out, they might decide that eliminating you is easier than allowing this investigation to proceed. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city looked normal. Cars driving. People walking. The world spinning on like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. How do I know I can trust you? I asked, turning back to them. You don't, Blake said honestly. That's the risk you're taking. But I'll tell you this. We've been waiting for evidence like this for 3 years. We're not going to waste it. We're not going to let it disappear. And if someone here is corrupt? I asked. If someone in this office is working for Harrington? Then we'll find out, Ryder said. Because people who are corrupt, they always make mistakes. And when they do, we catch them. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Because if I didn't, I was alone. Completely, utterly alone against a man with the power to make people disappear. Blake had arranged for a safe house, a townhouse in the suburbs with federal agents stationed outside. I wasn't allowed to leave without escort. I wasn't allowed to use my personal phone. Everything had to go through their secure channels. It felt like being in custody, except I hadn't been arrested. Eliza and the kids were brought in separately. They'd been terrified. Our daughter Ivy kept asking if we were hiding from bad people. Our son Mason, named after his uncle, though we called him by his middle name, Grant, didn't ask anything. He just held his mother's hand and stayed quiet. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen of the safe house, thinking about the photo album. My parents had kept it on the mantle for 15 years. Every important moment of my family's life was in those pages. My wedding to Eliza, the births of our children, holidays and vacations. And somewhere in there, on page 47, was the key to everything. At 6 a.m., Blake knocked on my door. She wasn't alone. She'd brought another agent, a woman in her early 40s with tired eyes and a federal ID that read, Agent Ivy Chun. "We need to get that photo album," Blake said. "Today? Right now?" "My parents' house is probably still under surveillance," I said. "Probably," Blake confirmed. "Which is why we're going to do this carefully. You're going to call your parents. You're going to tell them you need the album. You're going to say it's for grief processing, something a therapist suggested. They're going to believe you because it's the kind of thing people do after losing family. And then we pick it up," Agent Chin said. "In person, at a neutral location, a coffee shop, a park, somewhere public where anyone watching will think it's a normal family reunion." An hour later, I was sitting in a coffee shop called Meridian Brew, holding a folder containing my parents' photo album. My mother had wanted to come in person, but Blake convinced her over the phone that it was better if my father brought it. My father had looked at me for a long moment, a look that said he knew something was wrong, something deeper than grief, and he'd left without asking questions. We were back at the safe house by 9 a.m. Blake and Agent Chin sat across from me at a wooden table. Between us was the photo album and a laptop. "Page 47, Blake said. "What's the photograph?" I opened the album slowly, carefully, like it might break. The pages turned, memories layered on top of memories. My wedding day, our first house, Eliza pregnant with our daughter, and then page 47. It was a photograph of my brother Mason as a kid. He couldn't have been more than 8 years old. He was standing in front of a Christmas tree, holding a toy soldier, grinning at the camera. On the back of the photograph, in my mother's handwriting, was a date, December 23rd, 1987. 12/23/87. Chin typed into the laptop, formatting it as a password. She hit enter. The flash drive unlocked. Files populated the screen. Hundreds of them. Spreadsheets, PDFs, video files, audio recordings. My brother had documented everything. Every transaction, every communication, every order that had come down from General Harrington. Blake and Chin exchanged a look. Without saying anything, they both seemed to understand the magnitude of what they were looking at. "Start with the audio files," Blake said quietly. Chin clicked on the first one. A timestamp appeared, February 15th, 2024, 3:47 p.m. The audio crackled to life. A man's voice, cold, commanding, unmistakably military. That was General Victor Harrington. "Adrian, I need you to handle the Mason problem," the voice said. "He's become an obstruction. He's asking the wrong questions and talking to people he shouldn't be talking to." A second voice responded. I recognized it immediately from my one meeting at Mason's company event. "Adrian Coleman." "Understood, sir. How would you like me to proceed?" "I don't want to know the specifics," Harrington said. "That's what I'm paying Prometheus for. But I want it clean. I wanted to send a message. And I want it done before he meets with that attorney." "It will be handled," Adrian confirmed. The recording ended. I couldn't breathe. I was listening to my brother's death being ordered. Not hypothetically. Not in code. Directly. Explicitly. A general giving an order to kill. "There are more," Chin said quietly, and she clicked to the next audio file. This one was dated March 3rd, 2024. Same voice. Same cold precision. "The target has been eliminated," Adrian reported. The package was complete. No survivors as requested. Prometheus confirms the contract has been fulfilled. I stood up. I had to move. I had to get away from that table, away from those voices, away from the sound of my brother's murder being discussed like it was a business transaction. Blake grabbed my arm gently. I know this is hard, she said, but we need you to listen to one more. This one is important. She nodded to Chun, who clicked to a final recording. This one was dated just 4 days ago. The voice on the recording wasn't Harrington or Adrian. It was someone else. Someone younger. Someone afraid. This is Preston Harrington, the voice said, and I could hear the fear in every word. I'm calling to report that General Victor Harrington has ordered the elimination of Logan Brennan. Logan Brennan is a civilian with knowledge of classified military fraud. The general has designated him as a threat level alpha. He's ordered Prometheus Defense Solutions to execute the contract within the next 72 hours. My blood turned to ice. Preston Harrington is the general's nephew, Chin said quietly. 26 years old. Military intelligence officer. He's been working inside Harrington's operation for the past 2 years, gathering evidence for us. You have a mole, I said, understanding suddenly. We have a witness, Blake corrected. And he's recorded everything. Every order. Every payment. Every communication between General Harrington and the private contractors he's been using. How many people has Harrington killed? I asked. Blake and Chun exchanged that look again. That we can verify? 8 with your brother's family. Possibly more. But Preston's testimony, combined with these recordings and your brother's documents, gives us enough to move against him. To arrest him. To prosecute him. But, I asked, because I could hear the unspoken word hanging in the air. But Harrington knows Preston is compromised, Blake said. Harrington knows there's a federal investigation. And now Harrington knows you're involved, which means his timeline for eliminating you just accelerated. My phone buzzed. Not my secured phone, my old personal phone that Blake said was supposed to be off. The screen lit up with a text message from an unknown number. 3 words. We found you. The text message sent shockwaves through the safe house. Blake and Chun went into crisis mode. They confiscated my personal phone, locked down all communications, and called for backup. Agents flooded the townhouse. Windows were covered. Perimeter was expanded. We were locked in a federal fortress. But the damage was already done. At 2:47 p.m., Eliza's phone rang. She was in the living room with our kids watching a movie they'd both seen 100 times. She almost didn't answer. It was an unknown number. Hello, she said tentatively. I was in the kitchen with Blake when I heard Eliza's voice change. A shift from confusion to fear, so sudden it was like watching someone turn to stone. Blake heard it too. She moved immediately toward the living room, and I followed. Eliza was standing, her hand covering her mouth, her entire body trembling. Put it on speaker, Blake commanded, showing her badge. Eliza's finger shook as she pressed the button. A man's voice came through, calm, professional, measured. Mrs. Brennan, my name isn't important. What's important is what I'm about to tell you. Your husband has become involved in matters that don't concern him, matters of national security, and that involvement puts your family at risk. Who is this? Eliza asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Someone who wants to help you, the voice said. I represent people with significant resources and influence. People who would prefer that your husband cooperate rather than resist. And we're willing to compensate you for that cooperation. Blake was already signaling to another agent, pointing to trace the call. The agent nodded and disappeared with a laptop. What do you want? I asked, stepping forward. Mr. Brennan, the voice said, unsurprised by my presence. Thank you for joining the conversation. What I want is very simple. I want you to stop cooperating with federal agents. I want you to tell them that you've decided to recant your statements. I want you to say the evidence your brother left you is inadmissible or fabricated. I want you to disappear quietly. And if I don't, I asked. Then, the voice said with absolute calm, we will be forced to take measures that neither of us wants to take. Your daughter, Ivy, attends Meadowbrook Elementary, doesn't she? Third grade. Miss Harper's classroom. She likes to draw pictures of horses. Your son, Grant, plays soccer on the Riverside Youth Athletic League. He's the goalkeeper. Very talented for his age. The room spun. This person had surveillance on my children. This person knew where they went to school, what they did, who their teachers were, what they liked. You're threatening children? Eliza's voice cracked. What kind of animal threatens children? I'm not threatening anyone, the voice said calmly. I'm stating facts. Facts that can become very different depending on whether your husband cooperates or continues down this destructive path. We have the call traced, the agent whispered to Blake. The trace was coming from a burner phone somewhere in the financial district, routed through 3 proxy servers. It was designed to be untraceable. I need to speak with Agent Blake, I said. Of course, the voice said. But before I go, I want to tell you something important, Mr. Brennan. Your niece, Harper, your brother's daughter, is still alive. She disappeared the night of the incident at your brother's house. She was never found. She was supposed to be found, but she wasn't. My throat tightened. Harper, my niece, the 12-year-old girl with her mother's smile. We know she's alive, the voice continued. We don't know where, but we're looking, and we'll find her eventually. Unless your husband decides to be reasonable. Unless he decides that his life and his family's safety are more important than federal corruption charges that will be buried in classified files anyway. The line went dead. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The safe house that had felt secure 30 seconds ago now felt like a trap. That was Prometheus, Blake said quietly. That was someone operating on Harrington's direct orders. They didn't make that call lightly. They made it because they know they're running out of time. They know where my kids go to school, Eliza said, and her voice was hollow. They know everything about us. They have surveillance assets in place, Agent Chin confirmed. But they're bluffing about Harper. We don't know. Don't patronize me, I interrupted. We all know what that call meant. They have Harper. They know she's alive, and they're using her as leverage against me. Blake's phone buzzed. She read something on the screen, and her expression hardened. We need to talk, she said to me. Privately. We moved into the kitchen. Blake closed the door. 40 minutes ago, Blake said quietly, Preston Harrington went dark. He was supposed to check in with his handler. He didn't. We've tried reaching him multiple times. Nothing. We have to assume his cover is blown. What does that mean? I asked, though I already knew. It means Harrington knows Preston has been working with us, Blake said. It means the recordings, the evidence, the testimony. Harrington knows all about it. And it means Preston is probably dead or in active custody. I sat down heavily. There's something else, Blake continued. We ran a background check on everyone with access to this investigation. Everyone. And we found something. Agent Ryder, the Pentagon IG agent who was working with us. He has financial connections to a holding company that's connected to Prometheus Defense Solutions. Shell corporations, money laundering, the whole structure. Ryder is working for Harrington? I asked, disbelief and dread warring in my chest. We don't know yet, Blake said. But we have to operate under the assumption that there's at least one person in this investigation who is compromised. Which means our security is compromised. Which means your location might not be as secure as we thought. So what do we do? I asked. We move you, Blake said. Tonight. You and your family. We take you somewhere that only I know about. Somewhere without any federal infrastructure, without any standard protocols. Somewhere off the grid. And then we accelerate the case, Blake said. We arrest Harrington. We arrest Adrian Coleman. We freeze Prometheus's assets. We go public with the evidence before Harrington can bury it or before he can eliminate all the witnesses. What about Preston? I asked. Blake's jaw tightened. If Preston is alive, we find him. But right now, our priority is keeping you alive. Because if Harrington kills you, all of this goes away. The recordings, the documents, none of it matters without someone to testify to it. And Harper? I asked. We find her. Blake said with absolute conviction. We find her, and we bring her home. But first, you have to trust me. You have to be willing to disappear. I looked through the doorway at Eliza, holding our children close, both of them terrified and confused. I thought about Harper, my brother's daughter, somewhere out there in the hands of killers. And I made a decision. When do we leave? I asked. Blake drove me to a safe house outside the city. Not the one I'd been in. Not the one where Eliza and the kids waited. This was something different. Something isolated. A cabin on 50 acres of woods. No neighbors. No infrastructure. Nothing that could be traced. Harper was there. She sat at a kitchen table, looking smaller than I remembered. 12 years old, but somehow aged by trauma. Her hair was different, shorter, darker, probably a temporary dye job to help with identification security. But her eyes were the same. Her mother's eyes. My brother's eyes. When she saw me, she didn't run. She didn't cry. She just stared, like she was trying to decide if I was real. Harper, I said, and my voice broke on her name. I know you, she said quietly. You're Uncle Logan. Dad talked about you. He said you build things. Important things. I sat down across from her, and I didn't trust myself to speak. All I could do was look at her and think about the night her family died. About how this girl had hidden somewhere, terrified and alone, while her parents and brothers were murdered in the next room. The federal agents found me 3 days after, Harper said, her voice remarkably steady for a 12-year-old describing a nightmare. I was in the basement. Dad made me hide there if anything ever happened. He showed me the hiding spot when I was little, but I didn't think. I didn't know it would be real. Blake stood by the door, giving us space, but watching carefully. Your father, I said slowly. He knew something might happen to you? He knew something might happen to all of us, Harper said. He told me and my brothers that there were bad people who didn't want him to talk about things. He said if anything ever went wrong, we had to hide and wait for him to come get us. But he never came. I reached across the table, and Harper let me take her hand. He came in to say goodnight, Harper continued. That last night, he held me for a long time. He didn't usually do that. He told me he loved me so much. He told me he was trying to do something important, and he was sorry if it scared me. Then he closed the basement door and locked it from the outside. I thought he was just being extra careful. I didn't know. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. You're not alone anymore, I said. I'm going to make sure you're safe. The lady told me about the bad general, Harper said, glancing at Blake. She said you're helping stop him. She said you have proof he ordered the killings. We do, I confirmed. And I'm going to help make sure he answers for what he did. Harper squeezed my hand. Then I want to help too. The lady asked if I would testify. I said I would. I want to testify. A 12-year-old girl willing to stand in court and face the man responsible for murdering her family. The courage it would take. The emotional cost. You're very brave, I said. I'm very angry, Harper corrected. The lady said that's okay. She said anger is fuel. I want to use it. Blake nodded slightly, approving of Harper's resolve. Over the next 3 hours, Blake laid out the plan. It was dangerous. It was unprecedented. It was the only option we had. I would become a confidential informant. I would reach out to Adrian Coleman through a cutout channel, a supposed mutual acquaintance, and indicate that I was willing to negotiate. I would suggest a meeting with General Harrington directly. I would wear a wire. I would record everything. And I would try to get Harrington to incriminate himself. It's extremely risky, Blake said plainly. Harrington knows you exist. He knows you have the evidence. The moment he realizes you're an informant, he'll order your execution. We'll have agents positioned nearby, but response time in a real situation could be measured in seconds. And if it works? I asked. If it works, Blake said, we have him on recording giving orders. We have his voice, his specific language, his acknowledgement of crimes. It becomes an airtight case. We move on arrests within hours. Federal prosecutors take it to a grand jury. We get federal warrants for simultaneous arrests across multiple locations. Harrington, Adrian Coleman, everyone in the chain of command, They all go down. What about Harper? I asked. Harper stays here, Blake said, in protective custody. Once we have Harrington in federal detention, she'll be moved to a secure facility. She'll testify before a grand jury in closed session. Her identity will be protected as much as the law allows. And Eliza? Grant and Ivy? I asked. Witness protection, Blake said. New identities. New location. You can decide whether to join them or whether you want to stay in the fight longer to testify at trial. I understood what she was really saying. If I went into witness protection with my family, Harrington's reach would extend there. If I stayed visible, if I stayed fighting, I became a bigger target. But I also became unpredictable, harder to eliminate, valuable enough to Harrington that he'd want to silence me himself rather than send contractors. When do we do this? I asked. Tomorrow, Blake said. We contact Adrian Coleman. We set the meeting for 48 hours out. That gives us time to wire you, brief you, position our agents. And it gives Harrington time to feel confident that he's regaining control of the situation. Harper was listening to all of this. She understood what it meant. It meant I was about to put myself in the hands of the man who'd ordered her father's death. Uncle Logan, she said, are you scared? I considered lying. I considered telling her that I wasn't afraid, that I knew exactly what I was doing, that everything would be fine. Instead, I told her the truth. Terrified, I admitted. But your father was brave. He stood up to them, and it cost him everything. I'm not going to waste that. I'm going to finish what he started. Harper stood up and wrapped her arms around me. I held my brother's daughter and felt the weight of what I'd committed to. A meeting with a murderer, a wire, federal agents positioned to intervene, and the very real possibility that I would not survive the encounter. But it was the only path forward. Not revenge, not the crude, violent kind, but accountability, justice, the kind that comes through law and evidence and the federal system that Mason had believed in enough to die for. We need to make calls, Blake said. We need to contact the U.S. Attorney's Office. We need to get judicial authorization for the wire. We need to mobilize assets. This is happening fast. Then let's start, I said. I looked at Harper one more time. I'll make sure he pays. I promise you that. She nodded, and in her eyes, I saw something I hadn't expected to see in a 12-year-old: determination. Not childhood naivety, not innocent faith in the system, but a clear-eyed understanding that justice required sacrifice. That truth required courage. That some things were worth dying for. That night, in the cabin, I recorded a video message to Eliza and my children. I told them I loved them. I told them what I was about to do. I told them that no matter what happened, they should remember that I chose this. I chose to fight. I chose to honor my brother's sacrifice. And I chose to make sure that Harper and every other victim of General Victor Harrington's corruption and cruelty got justice. The wire was taped to my chest, microfilm thin, impossible to detect. Blake ran through the testing one final time. A small earpiece hidden behind my collar, signal strength verified, backup transmission active. Everything checked. Everything secure. You're clean, Blake said. If you're caught, you destroy it. Eat it if you have to. We need deniability. The meeting was set for 7 p.m. at an upscale restaurant called Meridian Heights. Private dining room on the top floor. The kind of place where powerful men conducted business away from prying eyes. Adrian Coleman had arranged it. The message was simple. The general wants to talk. Come alone. I wasn't alone. Blake and her team were positioned throughout the restaurant. One agent as a server. One as a kitchen worker. 2 more in a van outside. Snipers with overwatch from a building across the street. But for all practical purposes, I was walking into that room by myself. The drive to the restaurant felt like driving to my own execution. Adrian Coleman met me in the hallway outside the private dining room. He looked different than he had at the company event. Harder, meaner, like a man who'd spent the last week ordering murders and had become comfortable with it. Your brother was a good man, Adrian said, shaking my hand. The words were casual, like commenting on the weather. But he made a mistake. The general doesn't hold grudges. He just eliminates problems. I hope you understand. I understand, I said. The private dining room was elegant. Soft lighting. A mahogany table set for two. And sitting at the far end, in an expensive suit that probably cost more than my car, was General Victor Harrington. He stood when I entered. He extended his hand. He smiled like he was welcoming an old friend. Logan Brennan, Harrington said, his voice exactly as it sounded on the recordings. Controlled, measured, dangerous. Thank you for coming. Please sit. We have much to discuss. I sat. My heart was hammering in my chest. Blake could hear everything. She was listening. She was recording. All I had to do was get Harrington to confess. To say something on tape that would destroy him in court. Your brother was a patriot, Harrington began, pouring wine into 2 glasses. He believed in accountability, in transparency, admirable qualities in a young man, but naive ones in this world. He believed you were stealing, I said. Harrington smiled. Stealing. Such a crude word. I prefer to think of it as resource reallocation. The military-industrial complex wastes billions. Weapons systems that don't work. Contracts that fail. Soldiers in the field without the equipment they need. I found inefficiencies and corrected them. Some of that money found its way to my accounts. Yes, but I also ensured that American soldiers got the equipment they deserved. I provided it at premium prices to private contractors in the field. I redistributed resources. I balanced the equation. You had people killed, I said. I had problems eliminated, Harrington corrected. There's a difference. When a whistleblower threatens national security by exposing classified procurement operations, that's a national security issue, not a murder. When an auditor stumbles onto financial irregularities and becomes a threat to ongoing military operations, that's not assassination, it's damage control. My hands were shaking. This was it. This was everything we needed. A confession, clear language, specific admissions. Your brother, Harrington continued, was going to cost America dearly. Do you know how many soldiers depend on equipment I procured? How many lives my efficiency saved? Your brother's death was regrettable, but it was necessary. The wire. It was recording. Blake was hearing this. This was the case. This was justice. And then Harrington's expression changed. He stood up slowly. He walked to the door of the private dining room and opened it. Preston Harrington, the nephew I thought was working for the FBI, walked in. But he wasn't being escorted. He was walking freely. He was smiling. Hello, Logan, Preston said. My blood turned to ice. Preston is my insurance policy, Victor said calmly, returning to his seat. He knew about Agent Blake's investigation from the very beginning. He fed me everything. Every move. Every plan. Every protocol. Preston is what we call a triple agent. He works for the FBI, he works for me, and most importantly, he works for himself. What do you want? I asked, my voice hollow. What do I want? Victor laughed softly. I want you to understand that you never had a chance. Not from the moment your brother died. Your brother left you evidence. You brought it to Agent Blake. And the entire time, I knew what was happening. I've known every step you've taken. I've allowed this investigation to proceed because it serves my purposes. What purposes? I demanded. Elimination of loose ends, Victor said. Federal prosecutors, FBI agents, internal investigators. I've been identifying all the people who pose threats to my operations. Your brother's evidence, combined with this investigation, has flushed them all out. Preston has been cataloging them. By tomorrow morning, they'll all be reassigned or retired. The investigation will be quietly closed. The evidence will be deemed inadmissible due to illegal surveillance. And you? He paused, letting the silence hang. And me? I asked. You're going to have an accident, Victor said. A tragic one. You were so overcome with grief after your brother's death that you took your own life. Or perhaps you were killed in a robbery. Or a car accident. The details don't matter. What matters is that you disappear, along with any evidence of this conversation. I reached for my chest, trying to find the wire. Preston moved with military precision. His hand came down on my wrist. He twisted my arm. I felt the wire being ripped from my chest. Preston tore it apart, crushing the components under his shoe. "We scrambled the signal 10 minutes ago," Victor explained calmly. "Agent Blake has been listening to dead air the entire time. She has no idea what's happening in this room. She doesn't have recordings. She doesn't have evidence. She has nothing." Adrian Coleman moved toward me, and I realized with absolute horror that I was about to die in a private dining room in an upscale restaurant, surrounded by waiters who worked for Harrington, blocked by guards who would ensure no one interrupted. "Don't," a voice said from the doorway. Agent Blake stood there. Her gun was drawn. Behind her were federal agents, their weapons trained on Harrington, Adrian, and Preston. "You're under arrest, General Harrington," Blake said, "for murder, conspiracy, and crimes against the United States." Victor's expression didn't change. He simply sat back down and poured himself another glass of wine. "You were listening," I said, confused. "We were always listening," Blake confirmed. "Preston Harrington has been working for the FBI the entire time. Triple agent isn't an exaggeration, it's accurate. He's been reporting to us on Harrington's every move. The wire you wore was a backup. The real recording was from Preston's device. Everything, every confession, every admission, has been captured." As federal agents cuffed Harrington and Adrian, Victor looked at me with something approaching respect. "You were braver than your brother," he said quietly. "That will make your death all the more meaningful." "There won't be a death," Blake said coldly. "There will be a trial. There will be justice. And you will spend the rest of your life in federal prison knowing that a man you underestimated brought you down." As they led Harrington away, he smiled at me, a smile that said this wasn't over. That even in prison, his reach extended. That even locked behind bars, he remained dangerous. And in that moment, I understood that catching him was only the beginning of the fight. The victory felt hollow before it was even complete. Harrington had been in federal custody for exactly 16 hours when the first bombshell dropped. Blake called me to a secure briefing room at the FBI field office. Her face told me everything. Something had gone catastrophically wrong. "We've been compromised again," Blake said without preamble. She pulled up a series of documents on a large screen. After Harrington's arrest, we began examining everyone who had contact with him over the past 5 years. Federal prosecutors, military liaisons, procurement officers, politicians. We were looking for patterns, anyone who could have been his co-conspirator in government. "And you found something," I said. "We found everything," Blake said bitterly. Senator Julian Crane, Pentagon Deputy Director Hunter Matthews, 3 federal judges, at least 2 FBI division heads. Harrington didn't operate alone. He had an entire network protecting him, making sure investigations died, making sure witnesses disappeared, making sure his operations remained classified. The scope of it was suffocating. It wasn't just one corrupt general. It was systemic. Institutional corruption running through the highest levels of the government. "What about Preston?" I asked. Blake's expression hardened. "That's where it gets worse. Preston was extracted from the safe house we had him in 3 hours ago. We don't know how. The perimeter was secure. No one got in. No one got out. But Preston was gone. He was working for you," I said. "He was," Blake confirmed. "But he was also in extreme danger. Harrington has operatives everywhere. We tried to keep Preston protected, but Crane, Senator Crane, he has authority to access witness protection protocols. He essentially burned Preston's cover from the inside." I stood up. I couldn't sit anymore. The walls felt like they were closing in. "They're going to kill him," I said. "Almost certainly," Blake said. "Which brings me to why I called you here. We have another asset. Someone inside Harrington's operation who's been feeding us information. This person has confirmed that there's a facility, a private military detention site, where Harrington has been holding people. Other whistleblowers. Other threats. People who were supposed to disappear." "Where?" I asked. 40 miles north, Blake said. Off the military base at Garrison Ridge. It's technically federal property, but it's operated as a private security facility with Pentagon contracts. The people we're looking for include the families of federal auditors who tried to expose Harrington. At least 7 civilians. Possibly more. Including Harper, I said, understanding suddenly. Not Harper, Blake corrected. Harper is safe in our custody. But there are other children in that facility. Kids whose only crime was having parents who asked the wrong questions. I felt something break inside me. Children. Held captive. In secret facilities. In America. What are you asking me to do? I asked. I'm asking you, Blake said slowly. If you're willing to help us breach that facility. To extract the detainees. To gather evidence of crimes against the United States government. That's a federal crime, I said. Breaking into a military installation. It is, Blake confirmed. Which is why we can't do it officially. We can't get judicial authorization. We can't go through proper channels. Because the proper channels are compromised. Judges like those I mentioned would never sign warrants. They'd tip off Harrington's network. So you're asking me to help you commit federal crimes to expose federal crimes, I said. I'm asking you, Blake said quietly. To finish what your brother started. To get justice for Harper's family. To rescue people being held captive. To expose corruption so deep that it would make most people's heads spin. Eliza, my children, they were in witness protection now, hidden somewhere secure. Safe. But what was the point of being safe if the entire system was corrupted? What was the point of surviving if justice was impossible? When? I asked. Tonight, Blake said. We move now, before Crane can solidify his position, before he can have us removed from the investigation. We have 12 hours. Blake took me to a secondary location, a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Inside, I found not a federal strike team, but a collection of people who looked decidedly non-official. Former special operations soldiers, private military contractors who'd gone independent, CIA case officers who'd retired and gone dark, people who knew how to operate in legal gray zones. And at the center of it all was Agent Blake, coordinating people and equipment like she was commanding an actual military operation. We hit the facility from 3 angles, Blake explained, pulling up satellite imagery. North entrance, south perimeter, underground access through the adjacent drainage tunnel. We have insider information that the facility holds approximately 30 detainees split across 2 secure wings. We extract them all. We grab every piece of documentation. And we get out before anyone can call for backup. What about guards? I asked. Private contractors, Blake said. Prometheus Defense Solutions. They're well-trained, well-armed, and completely loyal to whoever's signing their checks. Which is now Crane, not Harrington. Crane's still confident he's controlling this situation. How many contractors? I asked. Somewhere between 40 and 60, Blake said matter-of-factly. Our team is 25 people. Those aren't good odds, I said. No, Blake agreed. But we have surprise. We have the layout. And most importantly, we have motivation. These people we're extracting, they're civilians. They're innocent. And they're being held in violation of every law this country has. Over the next 8 hours, Blake ran through the plan repeatedly. I memorized the layout. I learned hand signals. I was given a ballistic vest and trained on how to move through a combat zone without getting shot. I wasn't a soldier. I was a middle-aged real estate developer. But I was also the only person in that room who had direct knowledge of the evidence, direct knowledge of the case, and a personal stake in seeing it through to the end. As the sun began to set, Blake pulled me aside. I need to tell you something, she said. If this goes wrong, if we're discovered before extraction is complete, this facility will be destroyed. The evidence will be burned. The detainees will be executed. I've seen this before. Crane and Harrington will choose destruction over exposure. And if it goes right? I asked. If it goes right, Blake said, we change the course of American history. We expose corruption at the highest levels. We save lives. We give your brother's sacrifice meaning. As darkness fell and we moved toward the vehicles that would take us to Garrison Ridge, I thought about Mason, about the choice he'd made, about the price he'd paid. And I made the same choice he'd made. No matter the cost, no matter the risk, justice was worth fighting for. The facility looked like every other military installation: concrete, razor wire, guard towers with rotating spotlights. But this wasn't defending a border. This was concealing crimes. Our team moved in 3 vectors. I was with Blake's primary insertion group, moving through the drainage tunnel that ran beneath the compound. The tunnel was flooded ankle-deep with stagnant water that smelled like death. Our footsteps echoed. Our flashlights cut through absolute darkness. Behind us came 6 operatives, former Delta Force soldiers who moved like ghosts even in the muck. Blake's voice came through the secure radio. North Perimeter Team, status? In position, came the response. 2 guards rotating in 40 seconds. South Team, ready, another voice confirmed. All teams, go silent. Switching to hand signals only. 3, 2, 1, execute. The North Team moved. From our position in the tunnel, we couldn't see it, but we heard it. A burst of suppressed gunfire. 2 guards down, no alarms. Military efficiency, brutal and clean. We moved faster now, knowing we had seconds before someone noticed the downed guards. The tunnel opened into a basement corridor lined with metal doors. Blake pulled up the facility blueprint on her phone, a device that shouldn't have been able to transmit down here, but Blake's resources were beyond federal standard issue. Detention cells are East Corridor, Sublevel 2, Blake whispered. Evidence storage is north. We split here. My team takes evidence. Your team takes the cells. Understood, I said. The operative named Tristan, a former Army Ranger with cold eyes and methodical movements, led me down the corridor. We hit 3 more guards before reaching the detention block. 3 fights. 3 men neutralized. No shots fired. They used combat knives and hand-to-hand techniques that would leave minimal blood evidence. The detention cells were behind electronically locked doors. Tristan produced a device that looked like a modified phone. He plugged it into the electronic lock. 30 seconds later, the door hissed open. Inside was horror I hadn't prepared for. 7 civilians. 4 of them children. They were in cells designed for dogs, not humans. Concrete floors. Metal benches. A toilet in the corner. The smell was suffocating. Human waste, desperation, fear. An older woman was the first to move toward us. She was skeletal, hollow-eyed, like someone who'd been starved. Behind her came a man, and 3 children ranging from maybe 8 to 14. Who are you? The woman asked, her voice hoarse. Federal agents, I said. We're extracting you. Right now? Can everyone move? They could. Barely. Tristan and his team formed a protective perimeter as we moved back into the corridors. Blake's voice crackled. Evidence secured. We have documents, video files, financial records. The scope is massive. Moving to extraction. We were almost clear when alarms screamed to life. Someone had found the bodies. Someone had triggered the facility's lockdown. Emergency lights turned the corridors into a nightmare of strobing red. Doors slammed shut. We were trapped between sealed security gates. Blast through, Blake commanded. The charges detonated with precision. Concrete crumbled. We pushed through, moving toward the extraction point, the underground parking garage where vehicles were waiting. That's when we encountered Preston Harrington. He was alive, but he wasn't being held captive. He was armed. He was moving under his own power, and he was blocking our exit. Don't move, Preston said, his weapon raised, his expression unreadable. Preston, I said, understanding flooding through me. You're with Crane? I'm with whoever pays better, Preston said flatly. General Harrington is finished, but Senator Crane has deeper resources, longer reach. Harrington was small-time compared to what Crane has built. You're going to shoot federal agents? I asked. I'm going to create a scene, Preston said. A terrible tragedy. Escaped detainees rioting. An extraction team opening fire on civilians. The media narrative will be chaos. Everyone involved will be discredited. And by tomorrow morning, the evidence you collected will be destroyed, the facility will be sanitized, and business continues as usual. Blake stepped forward. Her weapon was holstered. Her hands were empty. "You're a good soldier, Preston," Blake said calmly. "But you made a mistake. You think this is about Harrington. It's not. It's about something larger. About whether this country can hold its leaders accountable." "Accountability," Preston laughed. "You believe in that fairy tale. I've seen how this works. I've seen how people like Crane make problems disappear. And I've decided I'd rather be on the side making people disappear than being disappeared." Blake took another step forward. "Don't," Preston warned. But Blake kept moving. And in that moment, I understood. Blake wasn't trying to convince Preston. Blake was buying time for her team to position behind him. 3 operatives moved silently into the parking garage from the north corridor. They had weapons raised. They had Preston in a crossfire. Preston realized it half a second too late. His gun came up, but Tristan was faster. One shot. Preston went down. But Preston had gotten his own shot off. A blast of gunfire that caught one of Blake's operatives, a woman named Morgan, in the shoulder, spinning her around, blood erupting from the wound. "Medic!" Blake screamed, and 2 operatives moved to Morgan while the rest of us secured the perimeter. "How bad?" I asked. "Bad," Morgan gasped. "But I can move. Get those detainees out of here." We did. We moved through the parking garage, loaded the rescued people into armored vehicles, and drove away from Garrison Ridge with every alarm in the facility screaming behind us. In the vehicle, I sat next to the older woman, the one who'd moved first toward rescue. "Who are you?" she asked me. "My name is Logan Brennan," I said. "My brother was Mason Brennan. He was an accountant. He died trying to expose what happened to you. What happened to all of you." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Mason," she said. "I knew Mason. He was kind. He was trying to help. I didn't know he paid the ultimate price," I said quietly. "But his sacrifice led to this. It led to you being rescued." Blake was in the lead vehicle with Morgan, who was getting field medical treatment. As we drove, Blake's phone rang. She answered it, listened for 30 seconds, then hung up. When she looked at me, I saw something I'd never seen in her expression before: exhaustion, and something that looked almost like defeat. "That was the U.S. Attorney's Office," Blake said. "Senator Crane has filed an injunction against the investigation. He's claimed that our operations constitute illegal surveillance of government officials. He's petitioned to have all evidence we collected deemed inadmissible." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," Blake said quietly, "that everything we just risked our lives for might not be usable in court. It means the corruption might be too deep to prosecute. It means justice might not be possible." I looked at the rescued detainees in the vehicle with me. Children who'd been held captive. People who'd been disappeared. All of them looking toward me with hope that I was bringing them justice. And I realized that the fight wasn't over. Not even close. In fact, it was just beginning. The courtroom was packed. Media, survivors, federal observers, and the curious, all cramped into a federal courthouse that had become the center of America's attention. But this wasn't a traditional trial. Legal warfare had a new battlefield, and we were fighting on it. The injunction that Crane had filed was supposed to make all our evidence inadmissible. But Blake had anticipated that move. We hadn't just collected evidence at Garrison Ridge. We'd also released copies to every major news outlet simultaneously. The Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, Fox News. Every platform had received the same package: financial records, audio recordings, video documentation, testimony from rescued detainees. You can't suppress evidence that's already front-page news. Public pressure became our legal weapon. Citizens called their representatives. Senators demanded investigations. The military's own inspector general, someone not in Crane's pocket, opened a parallel federal investigation. The story was too big to bury, too visible to ignore. Harper sat beside me in the courtroom gallery. She was 12 years old, but she'd aged decades. She wore a simple dress, blue, her mother's favorite color according to the photographs I'd seen. She'd prepared her victim impact statement for weeks. Blake had coached her. Psychologists had worked with her. But nothing could truly prepare a child to stand before the man who'd ordered her family's murder. General Victor Harrington sat at the defense table. He looked smaller now. Prison had worn him down. His military bearing was gone. But his eyes were still cold, still calculating. "The prosecution calls Harper Brennan," the judge announced. Harper stood. Her legs were shaking, but she walked to the stand with her head high. She placed her hand on the Bible. She swore to tell the truth. And then she told it. "My name is Harper Elizabeth Brennan," she began, her voice small but audible. "I'm 12 years old. My father was Mason Brennan. My mother was Giselle Brennan. I had 2 brothers, Colin and Oliver. On March 8th, my family was murdered. I survived because my father told me to hide in the basement. I hid there for 6 hours listening to nothing, knowing that everyone I loved had been killed." She paused. She took a breath. "I don't know all the details of why my father was killed. I know he was trying to stop someone from stealing money. I know he was trying to do the right thing. I know that the man sitting over there decided my family wasn't worth saving." Harper pointed directly at Harrington. Her hand didn't shake. "I want to tell you what I remember about my family," she continued. "My dad used to make pancakes on Saturday mornings. My mom used to sing in the car, even though she couldn't sing very well. My brother Colin wanted to join the Air Force. Oliver was working on a science fair project about renewable energy. We were just a normal family. We weren't important. We weren't a threat. We were just people who wanted to live." There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. When Harper finished, the defense attorney tried to cross-examine her. But even he seemed to understand the futility of it. A 12-year-old girl had just told the story of her family's annihilation. Nothing he could say would matter anymore. The trial lasted 4 weeks. Evidence was presented. Testimony was given. The recordings of Harrington ordering the murders were played in open court. The financial records were displayed. The testimony of the rescued detainees was heard. And the verdict, when it came, was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Murder. Conspiracy. Crimes against humanity. General Victor Harrington was sentenced to life without parole. But the story didn't end with Harrington. Because the investigation didn't stop with him. Adrian Coleman pleaded guilty in exchange for reduced sentencing. He gave evidence against Senator Julian Crane. Crane fought it, but the media firestorm was too intense. He resigned from the Senate. He faced charges. His political empire collapsed. Federal judges were removed from office. Pentagon officials were arrested. The investigation unraveled a corruption network so vast that it seemed impossible one man, my brother, could have started it all by simply refusing to look away. 1 year after Harrington's conviction, I established the Mason Brennan Foundation for Whistleblower Protection. The foundation provides legal assistance, financial support, and family protection for federal employees who report corruption. In the first year alone, we helped 43 whistleblowers come forward. 43 people who had evidence of wrongdoing but were terrified of retaliation. Because Mason taught me that courage is contagious. That one person's willingness to fight can inspire others. Eliza and I reconciled. My children, Ivy and Grant, started therapy to process the trauma of being threatened. They healed slowly, but they healed. Our marriage strengthened through the crucible we'd all passed through. Harper moved in with us. She became our daughter in every way that mattered. She started school again. She joined volleyball like she'd loved before. She laughed again, real laughs, not the hollow sounds of survival. On the 1-year anniversary of Mason's death, Harper, Eliza, Grant, Ivy, and I went to the cemetery. We placed flowers on Mason's grave, on Giselle's grave, on Colin and Oliver's graves. We didn't speak. We just stood there, remembering. "I think Dad would be proud," Harper said quietly. I think he'd be proud that you kept fighting, that you didn't give up. Your father was the brave one, I said. I just finished what he started. But you could have stopped, Harper said. You could have taken the witness protection deal. You could have disappeared with your family and let it all go. But you didn't. You chose to fight. She was right. I had chosen. Every step of the way, I'd made the choice to continue fighting. And that choice had cost everything. My sense of security, my family's peace of mind, my relationship with my parents, my sense of the world as a safe place. But it had also cost the people responsible for these murders their freedom. It had exposed a corruption network that was stealing from soldiers and killing citizens. It had protected future whistleblowers. That night, I received a call from Agent Blake. She'd been promoted to FBI Deputy Director. She was calling from her new office. I wanted you to hear it from me first, Blake said. Senator Crane was just sentenced. 20 years in federal prison. Multiple convictions for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and abuse of power. And the others? I asked. The network is being dismantled piece by piece, Blake confirmed. It will take years to fully prosecute everyone involved. But the infrastructure of corruption is being systematically destroyed. Your brother's sacrifice started something that will echo through this country for decades. After I hung up, I sat in my study and looked at the photograph of Mason on my desk. He was smiling, holding Harper as a baby, completely unaware that his pursuit of truth would cost him everything and change the course of history. I thought about the message he'd left me. Some things are worth the risk. He'd been right. And one day, when Harper asked me the hardest question, when she asked if it was all worth it, if the justice we achieved was enough to balance the loss, I knew what I would tell her. I would tell her that justice isn't about balance. It's about accountability. It's about refusing to let power operate in darkness. It's about the hard choice to stand up and say this is wrong, even when it costs everything. It's about the kind of courage that changes the world. Mason Brennan had that courage, and his sacrifice ensures that others, future whistleblowers, future fighters for justice, will know they're not alone, that their sacrifice matters, that the truth, eventually, will be told. The story of General Victor Harrington's corruption is being taught in military academies now, not as a case of individual failure, but as a systemic warning, as a reminder that unchecked power corrupts everything it touches. And somewhere, in federal prison, General Harrington sits knowing that a man he ordered killed, and whose family he destroyed, ultimately brought about his downfall. That's not revenge. That's justice. And justice, I've learned, is far more powerful than any weapon. Ready for your next thriller? Tell us what you want in the comments. We're listening. We're creating. We're bringing your next obsession to life.